One of the luminaries who was on my show was Margaret herself, and I've had no better guest or no more inspirational or informative guest than Margaret. I just wanted to echo her thoughts as relates to Brian. I too, sorry he's not able to make it here, but I'm sure I speak on behalf of all of us that he is and his family are in our thoughts and prayers for a very quick and speedy recovery of his daughter. So with that being said, we still have ourselves an absolutely dynamic duo. And I certainly feel privileged to host something on such an important topic, that being corporate nonprofit partnerships and some of the models that have come out of that, which we need to take a look at. I was speaking to the deputy mayor of New York the other day, and she was saying that the mantra down at City Hall right now is that the world as we knew it no longer exists. And that is an operational strategy that fits, I think, each and every one of us. And it is certainly true in the world of corporate philanthropy, as the emerging paradigm is shifting from transactions to relationships, from charity to investment, from organizations to issues. And Margaret and Charlie and CECP thought that as we begin to try to get our arms around this, it might be useful to have a perspective from the other side of the ledger, the nonprofit side of the ledger, which might get us to be thinking about things in a slightly different way. And that's what we're here to do today. Now, as we enter in this brave new world, we're all learning as we go along. And I don't think any of us have all the answers. But we are very fortunate to have two people from the NGO side who have a lot more answers than most of us. First, I'd like to introduce Dr. Helene Gayle, the president and CEO of CARE, a remarkable and legendary organization. It's a direct service agency in over 80 countries, and it generates a lot of financial resources from corporations, but engages them in many, many other ways as it relates to policy work, expertise, employee engagement, in-kind donations, and all the models inherent in the breadth of that kind of relationship. And also with us is Nancy Lublin. Nancy is the CEO and COP, as we know, Chief Old Person, at DoSomething.org. And as you all know, it's an organization that doesn't focus on any particular cause or any particular issue, but focuses on a group, young people, teenagers in particular, and how we engage that audience, which I think could be very vital to all of us in terms of informing all of our marketing efforts and our philanthropic efforts. I think that between the two of them, we should have the spectrum covered with a number and a different variety of models. Now, we ask ourselves, why is this important? And I think we probably know the reasons, but let me just cite two that immediately come to mind. If you look here in the United States for a minute, we generate $300 billion for philanthropic organizations, and a remarkable amount of money. And I think that we would all agree that the nonprofit sector in the U.S. is the most robust, dynamic, dedicated nonprofit sector anywhere in the world. Yet, we're not getting the results that we need or we expect. We're lagging in educational achievement. Healthcare is particularly fragile. More people are stepping in or falling into poverty. So I think that we recognize that something has to be done differently. Collaboration, collective impact, scalability, metrics. And central to that new model are going to be the partnerships between corporations and nonprofit organizations. The second reason I would say is that society expects this of us. The societal expectations have changed dramatically in the last 5 years. 70% of the people in the world and 80% of the people in the United States believe that corporations have a unique and distinct position to do social good more than any other kind of organization out there right now, certainly much more than government. And it was an interesting study I read earlier this week that in the UK, 91% of corporations felt that they were better positioned to affect social good than the nonprofit organizations in which they support. So it's a changing new world, and I think that as your customers expect it, I think corporations expect it of themselves, and certainly your employees expect it, particularly the younger ones. To give you a quick outline of the session, we will leave plenty of time for questions at the end of it, be assured. Margaret asked me to be sure that I kind of set this up and said we needed a frank and candid and opinionated conversation. And I'm saying to myself, well, with Nancy on the panel, why do I have to say that? That's a coming. And I would just like to say that as far as the conversation and your questions, social progress is very, very hard, and it is also very, very messy. So let's hope our conversations and our questions are a little bit messy, not the kind that just fit neatly into a journal, but the kind that have some ragged edges. With that being said, let me turn to Dr. Helene Gayle. Helene, you have embarked on some of the most thoughtful partnerships in the world out there. Here you are as an organization that is helped 122 million people last year in over 80 countries. But as I said before, you're also involved in employee engagement and sharing and policy work and expertise. Why don't you give us a quick overview of your corporate partnerships and the working philosophy you have with them?
Okay, well, tall order, and I know you want us to keep some of our comments brief, so let me just step back and give a little bit of a picture of what we're doing with the corporate sector. You know, when I came into CARE, like many organizations of our kind, you know, it was still very much in the era of corporate social responsibility being something that was isolated to a small part of the business, was often about reputation and enhancing reputation, and you know, our engagement were all across the board with organizations, and often it was, you know, give a couple $100,000 to build a schoolhouse in some country overseas that we can put in a brochure. I mean, I'm being a little bit categorical, but you know, it really was not really thinking about strategic engagements. And I think we have moved, just like I think the sector has moved very much, to thinking much more about how to have partnerships be deeper, more sustained, and more strategic. And so I think we have shifted very much over the last 5 or 6 years to looking at what our real long-term strategic vision is, and how does that sync with corporations that we want to partner with. And how do you have fewer and more sustained partnerships? Because I think all of us realize that, you know, when you're trying to be all things to all people, if you look 5 years from now, what you've done is perhaps help some individual causes or individuals, but you really don't have a true sustained impact. And we're all in this era of being much more results-oriented, looking much more at long-term impact. And so, you know, our partnerships have moved in that direction. We've really looked at, as an organization that focuses on global poverty, one of our core tenets is that we invest particularly in empowering girls and women, because we believe that they're how we're going to have sustained change in communities. So that's become one overarching way of looking at partners. So who are partners, for instance, who are very involved because their consumers are primarily women, or because the products they sell, et cetera. We also have areas that are particularly important for our focus. As an example, education or health, particularly looking at issues like maternal health, economic development, and increasingly looking at how to look at income generating activities as a way of economic development in poor communities. So, you know, again, financial inclusion more broadly, and I can talk about some of those kinds of partnerships. But, you know, as we look at what our strategic niche is, where are the areas that we want to partner with, then looking for partners who also have, you know, areas of interest. We also try to look at our partnerships with the private sector, not only as resources, clearly resources are core, but how do you look at the multiple assets that partners may bring? So whether it is volunteer engagement, co-branding, looking at the variety of resources that a corporation can bring, and using kind of a multi-asset approach to our partnerships. So fewer partners, more strategic long-term engagement, looking at multi-asset engagement. As an example, I look at one of our partners, Intel, where we're doing work in education. It's a big area for them. It's a big area for us. We're working in Intel, helping to develop and bring technology to classrooms. Intel employees actually work in the countries that we're working in. India is an example where they actually come, help to outfit the classrooms for the putting in computers and developing technology enhanced educational programs. It's a great opportunity for improving education, but it's also a way of engaging the assets that Intel as a corporation brings. And I could give other examples, but I think it's looking at where can we have those longer-term strategic engagements, and more, and I think it's reflected in some of the discussions that have gone on here. Yes, there are still corporate foundations, but more and more the corporate foundations and the core business units are working hand in glove and looking at how do the philanthropic activities really sync with the core business. And I think we found that when partnerships are developed both with the business units as well as the foundations, those are longer-term partnerships, because it becomes not just a feel-good on-the-side arm, but it really becomes very core to their business. And so, those are some of the things that we're learning as we get deeper into our engagement with the corporations.
Absolutely, great. Nancy, you, unlike most nonprofit organizations, a preponderance of your money comes from corporate partners, about 80%. And you obviously have a secret sauce that I think everybody in this audience would love to have, and that is, how do you reach these millennials? But as you have a spectrum of different causes that you support, is there a thread that holds your partnerships together?
Yeah, there's absolutely a common thread. Think about who you work for. Some of you are going to think that that's your direct boss, or your shareholders, or your board. I work for teenagers. I basically work for your children. I don't mean the people I work with in my office, although sometimes I feel that way. I mean, as an organization that's really driven by young people and social change, they are the boss of me. So on a Friday night, I'm watching iCarly. And there are certain, and now I can figure out which one of you have teenage daughters. This is the one of you who laugh. Yeah. So there are certain TV shows that I have to watch. There are certain things I have to eat and drink and say. And yes, I can sing the latest Carly Rae Jepsen lyrics to Call Me Maybe. And they're just things I work for teenagers. The interesting thing about teenagers now is that part of teenagers' identity is the brands they love. Corporations are no longer just something that sort of like targeting them or marketing them. It's actually part of their identity. So you can look in a kid's bio, take your own kid's bio on Facebook, and they'll list like that they're a Jonas Brothers fan, or not anymore. Now they're going to say they're a One Direction fan. And they'll look and they'll see that, or they'll say the movies that they like, or their favorite color, or the books that they're reading. They might also list Apple. Or they might also say Starbucks lover or Starbucks hater. They might say, I live for Dunkin' Donuts coffee or McDonald's coffee, but that's like part of their identity. So it's a natural for us to partner with things that they love. So that means celebrities that they care about, brands that they care about. And how do we see these things? We don't see you as a walking ATM. I know a lot of not-for-profits do. They see you, like particularly in this room, as like wallets with legs. And I don't see you that way. I see you as that and more. At least I'm honest, okay? And that's the first time I've heard you all laugh all morning, so that's good. By the way, I'm also, while sitting here, because I am that generation, I'm looking at the hashtag CPS Summit. So if you want to make a comment even while we're talking, I'm taking it while sitting here. So we're looking at that as we like your money. We are more than 80% funded by corporations. We will run more than 24 campaigns this year. And these campaigns are funded by cause marketing dollars. And they're funded by companies who also want to grow a deeper relationship with teens. But we also want your store windows. The back of a receipt is phenomenal real estate to say something about your partner. I want your Twitter following. We are one of the largest charities on Twitter. I want yours too. We want to integrate with your Facebook group. And I don't just say like, hey, fan, do something. We want an intrinsically social, for those of you who are in the other room with me, relationship with your following. We want to engage the people you have a relationship with us. And you do have a relationship with those moms and with those young people. And we want it too. That's how we think about it. So to give you a practical example, we look at our analytics all the time. And two of the causes that kids care about most, animals and homeless. Just always. They're like, I call them starter causes. They're like the marijuana of cause. And are there any drug-free groups in the room? I swear, I don't even drink alcohol. It's just a funny joke. But so animals, homeless. So we do a campaign around homeless every year. And a third of all the homeless in the United States are under the age of 18. It's a huge embarrassment, I think, and something that not enough of us are even aware of. And so we called all the youth shelters and we said, what do you need? What does, if you were 17 and homeless and got to a shelter, what would you ask for? Seriously, throw out, what would you ask for? Where's Michael Smith? What would you want if you were 17 and homeless? What would you ask for when you got to, what would you ask for if you got to a shelter?
Clean underwear.
Oh, good, he should ask for that. You're absolutely right. Clean underwear, she said. That would be a good one. Or food, money, a shower, a mobile phone. It's blue jeans. Blue jeans. When they get to a shelter, they ask for a pair of blue jeans because every other teenage kid in America is wearing blue jeans. And also because if I wore these jeans tomorrow with a different shirt, you wouldn't talk. But if Helene wore the same dress tomorrow, you would be like, where did she spend last night? So the thing about blue jeans is blue jeans, like they're durable, you can wear them, you don't need to wash them every day. Jeans are great, they're all season. So we said, okay, we can solve this. So we created a campaign called Teens for Jeans. We partnered with Aeropostale stores. Aeropostale stores, 1 in every 6 teenagers in America has something from Aeropostale in their closet. It's a great, clean brand, and it's the teen retailer that doesn't have shirtless guys in the windows. It's the clean one. So, like you don't need to Purell your hands when you leave a store. So we partner with Aeropostale stores, and we do it in January because every retailer needs foot traffic in January because no one's shopping in January. You just spend all your money. So we do it in January, and this year, in 3.5 weeks, we collected 1,020,041 pairs of jeans. That's a lot of jeans, and we drove between 300 and 350,000 people into their stores.
Fantastic.
That's a win for everybody. We collected a ton of jeans. Kids participated. They learned about the issue. They did something good. Moms were happy because they cleaned out their closets. Homeless shelters were happy because they now have jeans to lure kids off the streets and say, you want to be a pair of jeans? You have to be in our program and stay in our shelter tonight in order to get these jeans. And Aeropostale, thrilled and already signed up for multiple years with us. So this is how we
Did you approach them or did they approach you? I mean, in your relationships, I mean, who's the initiator? Is it the corporate partner? Is it the nonprofit organization, or is it a combination?
I mean, it's a little of each. So
Yeah.
it's a little of each. I'm sure you understand. It's a little of each. With that one, my COO, who makes me look like I have no energy, cold called Aeropostale and said, like, we have an idea. Do you want to talk to us?
Cool.
And so here we are.
Helene, let's talk about the beginning of these relationships. And you know, I think sometimes when a good idea like that comes up, what we often do is we rush into it, and we don't really take the time to set expectations of each partner and really define what success looks like. What do you do in that regard? Do you set those expectations? What do you account for? And what do you do at the beginning of a relationship to be sure that both partners know at the end of it that it's been successful or not?
Yeah, no, and I think in any good partnership, you know, whether it's a relationship or a partnership between organizations, you know, there is a courting period, and there is a period of getting to know each other and really thinking about, you know, what do you bring, what do I bring, and also learning to speak the same language.
Yeah.
You know, I think one of the things that is very clear that, you know, oftentimes, especially more and more as we're working with the commercial side, you know, we are speaking very different languages, and sometimes it takes time to get on the same page. We're talking about the same thing, but using, you know, sometimes very different ways of expressing that. So how do you really get on the same page? How do you make sure that you're defining goals very, very clearly and starting small? You know, I think it is in not being in a rush that you can develop some of your most successful partnerships. And so we tend to, you know, start with a small project to just get comfortable with each other, understand how we work, start setting some goals, see how that works, but with a sense of, yes, if this works out, we would like a much longer term relationship. So you're going into it with the expectation and the hope that this will be something that lasts, that this is something you build on, but let's start small, let's figure out how we work together, let's really look at how we define it, and let's have some clear metrics to say whether it works or not. Because you know, if you haven't set those expectations and those measures of success out there, if it doesn't work well, it's too late to then back up and say, okay, now let's put something in place to show whether we're successful. So being as clear as possible from the very beginning, I think is the way that we found, you know, we can have the most successful relationships.
Makes a lot of sense. Nancy, let me ask you this. I mean, we know in the nonprofit community, boy, we need revenues, we need partnerships. Have you ever engaged with a corporate partner where you really got something not insignificant, but significant, but at the end of the day, you just had to walk away from it? And if so, why?
I'm getting the tough ones. Come on. She's the big deal. I'm like the little nothing.
You're the chief old person. Come on.
Yeah. I would say there's two that I'll talk about, and we
Talk about the other two.
We retain more than 80% of our sponsors year over year. And so the question about is it successful? We have of a small, I mean compared to CARE, of a small staff of less than 50 full-time staff, 2 of them are data analysts, and so we really watch whether or not what we do matters. So like Staples, for example, will tell you that working with us back to school actually outperforms their other back to school marketing, which is great. Like
Super.
that. I like being able to say that at CECP. So having said that, like there have been 2 instances, and I would do them again, where we'd walk. So one of them was actually in my second week on the job at Do Something, which was really awesome. When I got to Do Something in 2003, it was a mess. I don't know if anybody remembers it in the 90s. Actually, I was just talking about Andrew Shue. When Andrew Shue founded it, like gorgeous Andrew Shue from Melrose Place had founded it in the 90s. Aaron Spelling gave him a minute of airtime to launch it on TV, and it was everywhere when he was on the cover of Sassy and on Jay Leno. And when that stopped, the organization had really fallen on hard times. When I got there in 2003, they had just laid off 21 out of 22 people. There was $75K left in the bank. They were $250K in debt, and they just lost their free office space. Everything was in boxes in storage in Queens, and nobody knew who had the key. And when I got there, they said, go down to, I won't even say the city, and sign a contract. There is a $600K contract waiting for you to sign, which will save the organization. So I went down and I met with this company, and this company wanted us to open up, Do Something offices in cities. I will make up the cities so that you can't even figure out the company. Albuquerque, San Diego, random markets around the US where they had clusters of either employees or consumers. And they wanted us to open there. And I said, not signing it. And I called the board and I said, I didn't sign it. Here's the thing. It's 2003. It's the year after Friendster. It's the year before Facebook. And I said, the future of reaching young people is not in these local markets. We've got to move the whole organization online. And you're just going to have to trust me on this. We're going to be broke for a few more months, but I promise you we're going to make it. They almost fired me. We didn't work with that company. I didn't sign it. So in one instance, we will walk, even if it's a lot of money, from something that just doesn't make sense. Because we're not your vendor. We're your partner. And I want to be able to deliver. And we weren't even going to be able to deliver something successful in Albuquerque. So even though we're desperate for the money, we're not going to do anything for the money. I'm not a whore, okay? The second instance in which we walked was we worked with a bank. That's not a newsflash. I am not a whore. So the second instance where we walked was we worked with a bank. A big bank. And when you're in New York, you have to work with a big bank. We worked with a big bank in New York when I first got to Do Something, who I had worked with at Dress for Success, so I knew them and had a good relationship with them. And we ran a financial literacy campaign. And the financial literacy campaign was wildly successful. 96% of the kids who took the survey said they would do it again. They would do this campaign with us again. And to be honest, the people at this bank had made 2 of my staff cry during the tenure of executing this campaign. And there's no way to really irk my wrath better or more quickly than to pick on the junior people on my team. And so I looked at this foundation person and said, we're not going to do year 3 with you. And she said, how can you do this? How can you walk away? I actually was threatened and was told, I'll make your name mud in this town. The good news is I knew her boss's boss, so that was fine. But we walked, and it was a lot of money, and it was still in the early days of the organization when we didn't have a lot. But we have a very strict no douchebag policy. Like if you're just a mean person or you're not happy, because we believe in doing good, but we also believe in having fun while doing it. Yeah. And like your life is short, you have a busy day also. You should expect the same of us, by the way, in the not-for-profit world. No matter how awesome Dr. Gayle is or I am, you shouldn't work with us unless you actually are enjoying it. And those are the 2 instances where we'll walk. If it's really not a fit and if you're just not nice.
I'll remember those. Helene, let me ask you about metrics for a moment. You mentioned that before, and I think one of the great things that the nonprofits are always struggling with is really trying to show the social impact back to a corporate partner in terms of the impact that they've made, the metrics in that regard, not only in terms of the overall organization, but specifically as far as that particular partnership is concerned. What do you do for your corporate partners in terms of letting them know the impact of what their collaboration with you has been? And do you think the corporations are being reasonable, or are they expecting too much in a world where we're all trying to get successive approximations to find that holy grail of social impact?
Well, no, I mean, I don't think it's too much to ask that we show that we have impact. You know, I think we are past the point where, you know, just doing something that makes you feel good is enough. I think we should expect as much from social returns and social good as we do from economic and financial returns.
Sure.
So I don't think that that's asking too much to be able to demonstrate that. That said, it is oftentimes very difficult to be able to measure social impact. And I think we're getting better at looking at proxy measures for whether or not you're making longer term social change, which ultimately is, you know, our goal is how do you have sustainable change, not just short term year by year change, but how are you really catalyzing change in the long run so that you're moving from, you know, in the kind of cliche way, giving people a fish to teaching people to fish. And you know, making sure that industries are not destroying the fish in the stream, so that you know, so you're really looking at that whole spectrum. And I think you have to look at measures that are both short term but also long term. But it's sometimes, you know, I think we also have to be realistic about the fact that if we are not also creating economic value, there will be no social value. And that in the long run, if we're not helping communities develop economic sustainability, that there will be no social good either. And so as an example, in a project that we have, we've actually developed an arm of CARE that is a for-profit arm that allows us to have actual for-profit returns on our projects. And we started in a program in Bangladesh that started out as a traditional development program with grant resources that we then turned into a business enterprise. And this is a program that uses almost like an Avon lady model, where women, poor rural women in Bangladesh, are given products. A couple of our partners, Unilever and Bata, the shoe company, have joined in with Danone in a social enterprise venture where they're actually injecting, you know, capital and expecting an economic return. It's also an income generator for the women. It's building new markets, because these are rural areas that these companies would never have been able to really get the kind of reach that we can through our program. So this is both enhancing their bottom line. We now have over 12,000 women who have generated, at this point, up to, the business has grown from zero to about a $5 million and growing business that is both generating economic return, but we're also measuring the social return. We realize, though, that we have to be as strict on both and be able to demonstrate an economic return. And I think for us, it's flipping us on the head a little bit, because we've always looked at the social return and not thought about, so how are we also generating economic return? The two have to go hand in hand, and we've got to be as rigorous as both. And it's been a great learning experience, because I think they've gotten better at measuring their economic metrics, and we've gotten better about measuring the social metrics in the meantime, but the two are going hand in hand.
Yeah, and you said to me earlier also that there's also a new mindset in nonprofits with respect to a respect and understanding that there has to be a business return, something that probably wouldn't have existed 5 or 10 years ago.
Yeah, you know, I think, you know, if you were to think about it 10 years ago, most in the not-for-profit arena thought that was the dark side and we were the light side, and there was this clear divide between those who do good and those who, you know, make money. And you know, it's a very naive notion, but I think it partly has to do with the fact that, you know, in some ways, perhaps the for-profit side swung too far in one direction, and perhaps the not-for-profit side swung too far in the other. You know, I think we've come now together to kind of blurring those lines and realizing that, after all, you know, if you look at the history of our country, it was our wealth creation that was also an engine for social change. And I think we're getting back to that, to recognizing that these don't have to be, they are not in opposition, that in fact creation of wealth is an engine, and a sustainable engine for social change. And so I think that's coming back together, and I think those in the for-profit arena are recognizing it, and recognizing the skills and talents that come that also enhance our ability to do our business in a much more deliberate and intentional way.
Absolutely. Nancy, let me ask you this. You obviously have some great relationships with a whole host of corporate partners, American Express and Macy's and Foot Locker and Staples, you mentioned, and a bunch of others. And even beyond, let's say, the relationship that you have with them directly, do you ever sit back and look at it from the corporate perspective and say, boy, where corporations are really missing the boat as it relates to these relationships, that they could really do something with it? Does that anything ever cross your mind? I look at this.
Since I don't have any opinions, that never crosses my mind. Yes.
Yes. Okay, well, there you go. And moving on.
You know that show Wife Swap? Do you remember that? It would be so fun to switch jobs with some of you for a week. And you would probably have fun switching jobs with you, because you started this whole panel, basically, Denver, by saying, like, the not-for-profit sector is huge and growing, and you're not solving anything. I mean, this is what we get all the time. We're giving you more and more money, and you guys can't seem to get it done. That really feels awesome when we're told this all the time. But sometimes we look at you and we think, like, you're throwing bad money over good. We were just talking at the table, I won't say who, but accounting firms, law firms, and advertising firms, I feel so bad for you all. You are stuck buying the tables at our dinners. Like, can we just be, let's just be honest about this one and put it out there. We know that's why we honor certain people, because we know that the person who's runs a brand has an ad agency and an accounting firm and a law firm that person can call and be like, you got to buy a $50K table. I'm being honored.
Yeah.
So this is this sort of unspoken dance that we do. So sure, if I ran your philanthropy, I would just put out an edict that says no more tables. Sorry, I know law firm in Atlanta, our office there, or our accounting office in Chicago or something, you have to buy these tables because so-and-so is being honored and we're their accounting firm. I would just say, so that's one of the things that I would try and do. I'd probably be fired, right? But that's one of those things that I do, and I know there's lots of things that you want to tell us to do differently. So I think we feel each other's pain.
Yeah.
To get to the same question that you actually asked Helene, I think the key is to be explicit and honest at the outset. How do these partnerships work well? Tell us what success looks like. So do you want foot traffic in January? Is that what you need? Are you just looking for more Facebook fans and you really want to grow your social presence? Is it that the person you work for has a daughter who is a huge Justin Bieber fan, and so you just need Justin Bieber to show up at that event and your boss is going to be happy? Just be honest with us and tell us what that thing is, and we can be better partners. And we should also, as not-for-profits, be honest with you. And when we say to you, it's not about the money, we're lying. It's largely about the money. We need your money in order to stay afloat, a lot of us. There are other things of yours that we need too. But I think, can we just here at this summit agree to just have a more explicit, honest communication between the two sectors? Because that list of organizations that you mentioned that we work with, those companies, our best partnerships are the ones where we all know what success looks like at the beginning of a campaign, and so we nail it together.
And I think it goes back to this notion of having long-term partnerships, because I think if you have a long-term commitment to begin with, you're less afraid to be honest. You're more willing to make mistakes together, and realize that it is after a long-term investment that you're going to get those kind of results and outputs. And I think corporations have to think just like they do about their business ventures, that you go into new markets not thinking that you're going to get a return tomorrow. You go into new markets recognizing that the return may be 10 years from now. And I think people don't often think about our sector in the same way and think that this is charity work. None of you in this room think that, but people often think, well, this is charity work, this is nice, you can do these things in a year or two, and we expect huge results after just a short amount of time. The expectations can't be any different around what it takes to create social good than it is around what does it take to create generate wealth and generate economic returns. And so I think it's, again, that notion of having a longer term view and a commitment to longer-term partnerships, then I think we can be honest, and I think we can make mistakes together and learn from them and keep going and move forward.
Wonderful insight. Let me just pick up on what Nancy said about it's about the money and beyond the money and the other things we need from corporations. You know, I think the Great Recession really got corporations to rethink their philanthropy in terms of other assets beyond money, particularly their skilled employees. And you know, there was a survey recently that said 71% of corporations believe that their non-cash assets could actually have greater impact for the nonprofits that they support than their money, but only 38% of nonprofits shared that view. Tell us the challenges and the importance of these non-cash assets. And by challenges, I mean, we know how difficult it sometimes is to really meaningfully engage an employee and give them something truly to do. It's almost like a separate skill set for us. And in your situation also in terms of in-kind donations. Sometimes they're wonderful to have, but then you're like, well, what am I going to do with these? So tell us how you see this trend in terms of things getting outside of cash and trying to engage all the other assets of a corporation.
Yeah, well, yes, cash is king, and cash is critical. And you know, I would agree when anybody says we don't really want your cash. It's that's probably unlikely. That said, other assets can be incredibly important, but they have to, you know, and I know I sound like a broken record, but it has to be around a longer-term sustainable engagement. No more than taking, you know, a 3-week volunteer. We get asked all the time, you know, can I come and volunteer at a care site? Well, volunteers who come and drop in for 2 or 3 weeks are not particularly useful. But when you have engagement, employee volunteer engagement, as part of a longer-term program, it can be incredibly useful. I give another example that of a company that we do a lot of work with, UPS. Because of all the logistical support that they can contribute, particularly for us in emergency situations. Well, we've had a executive loan to us over a several-year period. Well, this is somebody who gets to know our business, who works with us, who can contribute their logistical capacity and knowledge, but in a long-term way. That's hugely useful.
Yeah.
But having somebody drop in for a short period of time who doesn't know the business, doesn't have a clear understanding of the goals and how we do business isn't particularly useful. So again, I think it's in these longer term. Pfizer is another example that does loan executives, put somebody in a country office for 6 months, got real experience with the country office, was able to provide incredible management and financial support that was very, very useful. So we have work that we do with factory workers, where we are working with some of the major garment industry leaders who have this great knowledge of factories. We're not a factory, we're not a factory organization. We don't understand all the factory dynamics, but we do know the communities that those factories draw upon. So it's by sharing that kind of expertise, but really, again, with a strategic view and with a long-term view, that those are particularly useful. Same with in-kind donations. The panel last evening talked about that a lot. Don't give us what you want to give. Yeah. Give us what we actually need.
Right.
Don't give us, drugs that have expiration dates passed, or equipment that there's no ability to maintain it in overseas sites, or clothing that nobody wants to wear. But give us the things that we actually need. So it's about the dialogue, and it's about, again, setting the parameters.
Yeah. So there's stuff.
Yeah.
There's other assets that you have, like marketing and your relationships. So if you're a company, McDonald's is in the room, right? You take a ton of advertising. Something that you could do that's really awesome for any not-for-profits that you support is you're really needed by all those magazines and newspapers and television that you could say, we spend so much money with you, how about giving a PSA spot to one of our favorite charities, or to Ronald McDonald House or something like that. I mean, you have power that we don't have that would be really great if you would share with us. The other thing that you have is people. Your people know stuff and do stuff that sometimes is hard or expensive for us to hire. So I understand that Charles Best was here yesterday from Donors Choose. So I don't know if Charles shared with you, but the way that Donors Choose was originally built was that three, I think it was, engineers from Yahoo were given a sabbatical for a couple of months to build the original platform for Donors Choose. And that's created a huge sense of pride internally at Yahoo for those employees. Could you imagine creating a sabbatical program? I mean, Intel, Shelley, if you would do this, we're dying for engineers, right? So if there was a program where work at Intel for 3 years and get a 1-month paid sabbatical to volunteer at a not-for-profit as an engineer, not building houses, but as an engineer, so long as you come back and agree to stay at Intel for another 2 years. Phenomenal program, source of pride. And I was hearing in the other room, one of the things you guys want to understand is how your corporate philanthropy and cause marketing can affect your internal cultures. Please think about bartering your people, especially all of those engineers, those marketing experts, accounting and finance. Right. I mean, those are expensive people for us to hire. And to have somebody on hand for the month when we all have to do audits. Our Form 990s are due May 15th. Give us somebody from April 15th to May 15th. Fantastic. You have all of these other things that you really could leverage. I mentioned before the back of sales receipts. Your store windows, most of us don't have a footprint like you have. I mean, it's phenomenal. We have headquarters in one location and a few other cities, but your footprint is incredible. We could use that. So there's so many other things. I know I'm sounding a little bit money grubby up here. I keep talking about your money. There really are other things of yours that we covet.
Great. You know, let us move on a little bit to collaboration. And I think we all understand that collaboration is essential to really make the impact that we want to make. And sometimes when you try to get competitors to collaborate, it can be a little dicey. Now, it's somewhat easier around a Syrian event, like 9/11 or Katrina or Haiti or whatever the case may be. But I know, coming from the nonprofit sector, even getting nonprofit organizations to collaborate is no easy task. But I was wondering if either of you have ever had an experience of where you've had to bring together some competitors, banks or accounting firms or retail stores, around a common purpose or a common cause, and how you were able to make that happen and what lessons were to be learned from that.
Yeah, you know, I think we're actually sometimes better at getting different sectors, different companies to work together than they might be by themselves. And so in some of our partnerships, we've been very successful. Take as an example, we have a program that we started with General Mills called Join My Village, and it's an online giving program where they give a certain amount of their resources, their employees can go online, and then it's open to others. Well, we've been able to draw other corporate partners into that because it's something that doesn't put them head to head in competition over, you know, markets or over their business, but it is a way of working in particular geographies. In this case, Join My Village was focused on a program in Malawi in Southern Africa. Merck, which is another partner that's joined recently, is focusing primarily in India and a program there. But it's a platform that allows for corporations, and they happen to be in different businesses, but to come together around a program that one started, but others can join. And we're looking at other corporations who may be interested in joining in that as well. We have another example where several retail companies have come together in a project that a retailer, Walmart, happened to be put in the initial
lead,
resources for a factory program that we have, that now other consumer goods companies are joining as well. And so it's been a way of leveraging resources. And when we talk to partners, they say, well, you know, actually they would like to have others who would be willing to put in resources because then their dollars go further. And it's actually a way of leveraging the original investment. And everybody gets credit.
Yeah.
And everybody's employees can feel good about it. So I think sometimes we can serve as a platform for collaboration that doesn't exist otherwise.
You agree with that, Nancy?
I mean, yeah, there are a few exceptions. Like I once took the first time actually I went to Pepsi, they said, can we get you something to drink? And I said, how about a Diet Coke? I thought it was funny. And nobody laughed.
No sense of humor in that.
It was not funny. No. It was not funny. I think I'm funny. It was not funny.
Well, you are.
But that was not funny. Like,
Yeah.
So there are some people who are they're not going to collaborate, no matter how good it is or how good the cause is. I mean, it's just not going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Although they are collaborating on water.
That's
And
good.
I think it's, I think, again, I think that there are some times when, because the issue is so
That's
critical, that people who, otherwise wouldn't collaborate are coming together.
I mean, I'm jealous. That's great. That's great. And I think, look, and I don't think that's unique to the for-profit world, like you said. I mean, not-for-profits are sometimes not very nice to each other.
Mm-hmm.
We pride ourselves to do something because we cover all causes. We call ourselves what's called cause agnostic. So we'll work with everybody. And so we work, for example, with the ASPCA, Humane Society, and PETA, which is a really interesting trifecta.
Yeah.
So we'll work with all those kinds of people. So it's interesting, but like Dr. Gayle says, when the cause is more important than the egos or the individual business priorities, it can get done.
Yeah, and you know better than I, Nancy, but I've kind of observed the fact that it is less turf-oriented with younger people than it is with older people. I think with the baby boomers, I think they set these organizations up and they have a tremendous pride in their organization, where I look at my daughter and she's much more interested in the cause itself, and the organization is relatively insignificant as it would be compared to myself.
Well, this is a challenge for a lot of organizations. So I'm Jewish. Okay, if that wasn't obvious by my talking with my hands all the time, but I'm Jewish, and my grandparents are like very involved, right, with like UJA and like Jewish org. Maybe you have family members who are like, okay, you are too. So so maybe you have parents who are like very involved with like Catholic charities or their local church. Basically, the grandparent generation, a lot of their philanthropy, is still very tied to their identity and their sort of demographic identity. And this generation, like, that's not how they're doing their giving. They're doing their giving to like this particular homeless shelter or this specific campaign, or it doesn't even have to be an organization. It's just an issue, a sort of an amorphous issue. They're issue identified, not identity identified or organization identified. It's actually a real challenge for some of those 100-year-old not-for-profit organizations that are based on identity. And by the way, it's across the board. It's not just the Jews who are having trouble or the Catholics. It's also...
No, you're absolutely right.
I mean, everybody.
Yeah,
like
you're just spot on.
Everybody's having trouble.
One of the things about the sector is that we don't really share enough stories. And the stories that we do share are generally good news stories. So let me open this up to both of you before we open up the questions to the audience. Are there any partnerships that you've entered into that you just knew were going to be smashing, were going to be great, and just absolutely fell flat on their face? And if so, what lessons were to be learned from that?
I can see that coming.
No names that need to be mentioned, but...
I think the partnerships that have fallen flat on their face were the ones that weren't honest, where people really were expecting something very different, where we said, we don't do X, a check was cut, an agreement was signed, but they really expected we were going to do X.
Yeah.
And no matter how many times we said, this is not what we do, this is not our, this is not our niche, that wasn't accepted. And so I think it's, again, in the honesty and the ability to be blatantly honest. And I think, the mistake that we probably made was knowing that they wanted us to do X, and we weren't. In our interest in having the resources, thinking that, well, maybe, it's just like any relationship. You end up with somebody and you think that they're going to change, and
my wife didn't work out.
Irritating habits that they came into the relationship with, they still had, and you have to at some point give up and realize, that awful tick that they have is just not going to go away. And so I think it's in being open and honest, and not thinking that maybe if we keep working on it, somehow they'll accept that we don't do X and give us the check, and they'll and vice versa. So
and I see you nodding, Nancy.
Yeah, I mean I absolutely agree. The only thing I would add is be honest, and then if you can. Anybody here go to law school or is a lawyer? Okay, so I went to law school for 6 years.
Most
It's
people
supposed to
do
be three.
3.
Yeah, I know.
You won twice.
And keeping the lawyers out of this as much as, I mean, this is just a good rule for life, for good relationships. But like keeping the lawyers out of it is really awesome. So, I mean, you can have like a great agreement and a great partnership that's starting with somebody, and then the lawyers all of a sudden send us like a 20-page agreement, and you know, it's gonna have to be litigated in like their city, and I'm like, why are you talking to me about litigation? It's like a prenup, you know? Like no one wanted to be handed one of those, and so it's just you can really sort of overthink these partnerships. If your relationship is good.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Don't send a 20. The 20-page agreement is overkill. It really is.
And you started the question out saying, did you ever think there was something that was going to go smashingly, and it didn't? I think generally you go into the relationships that aren't going to work out, and you know it.
Yeah, yeah.
And you really do
In your
know
gut,
that
you hope against hope, but you know in your heart.
Gut, you know that it's not, and you know that they're expecting something that you're not going to deliver, and
Sure.
you're thinking that it's all going to go away and change. So I think it's rare that you have this great program that you think is going to go well and it doesn't. It's more likely that it's in your gut that
Your gut is your gut, absolutely. We have about 10 minutes for questions. Would anybody have any questions for our panelists? Yes, over there.
Hi, I was on a panel about reputation feedback on corporate investment earlier on, and there's obviously a clear reputational gain for corporations to get involved in non-profits. But some of the research that we've done has suggested that people can look at non-profits and their partnerships with corporations, and if it's the wrong partnership, it can actually have a negative impact on your reputation. Mm-hmm. How much do you take that on board when you're actually getting together with these partnerships?
Great question.
Yeah, I mean, we have a set of guidelines that we use. We vet all the partners that we're thinking of developing partnerships with. It is a reason for not engaging in a partnership if people don't meet criteria that we have laid out that have to do with transparency and social responsibility and environmental sustainability and a whole range of different things. Past reputational risk and what were the implications or the causes for that. So we go through that, and before we enter into a partnership, we have looked at and vetted organizations, just like I think corporations do with us.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Same. And if you're a tobacco company, don't call me. Same.
Yeah, and we have same. I mean, there's certain industries that we just, are for us, we just don't partner with.
Great question. My name is Nicole from Kraft, and I just want to probe a little bit further on that. Kraft Foods, kind of a household name, and in some of our dealings with multinational NGOs, and not anyone in this room, we've gotten feedback that, they want the money to fund the program, but then when we talk about partnerships with our brands, these sort of more cause-oriented, then they're selective about what brand. I could do Triscuit, but I don't think I could do Oreo. Or let me put a disclaimer on the Oreo. And that can't work. Mm-hmm. So it's sort of this, I want your money, but then I don't want this. I'm not going to endorse this. Well, you don't want it at all, in my opinion, in a way. And it's actually made me think more about the point that was made about gravitating more towards the cause, and the organization itself becomes obsolete because it's more about the cause and the connection with the consumer.
I think that's a trend that's happening. I mean, I wrote about this for Fast Company a few years ago. I call it Jurassic Park syndrome. Do you remember the movie Jurassic Park? So the first one, not the other two. The first Jurassic Park, what happens is at some point in time, the dinosaurs learn to turn the doorknobs by themselves, and then the people hiding in the kitchen really know their toast. Mm-hmm. I think what's happening, and I just saw this in the room actually before here on the social media, this is the first time that I've ever been at a corporate philanthropy conference where everyone on the panel, so there was Chase, basically there was Pepsi, and there was Toyota, was there, and they had done their own programs. They hadn't necessarily partnered with a not-for-profit. They did it themselves. Mm-hmm. And that was, I think, a real turning point. An hour ago for me was seeing this. A lot of you have designed and are creating your own programs, and you're not necessarily partnering with an organization, you're just partnering with a cause or an issue, and you're doing it yourself. I mean, I think that was a real tipping point, at least for me today, seeing that. And I think that's a trend. And I blame some not-for-profits for being difficult to work with. We haven't made it easy for you in some instances. And by easy, maybe we weren't clear enough or honest enough. By the way, I'll take Oreo or double stuff. But if an organization doesn't want Oreo or double stuff, I also like Easy Mac. I mean, I'm good. So, but if an organization didn't want those, did they explain why? I mean, was there a good reason? Because, by the way, if they didn't want to work with Oreo, my guess is that it wouldn't have worked out well for Oreo and Kraft either, because it meant that their target market was somehow going to rebel and push back against the partnership. That's the kind of thing that maybe KFC and Susan G. Komen should have had a conversation about
absolutely right.
in advance, right? There was clearly, if there had been that honesty up front, that could have been avoided. So I think of that kind of honesty, but my encouragement is please, like, don't leave us by the wayside and turn the doorknobs without us. I know that I realize in this analogy that makes you the dinosaurs. I'm sorry, but please don't like leave us, because a lot of us are actually very good at what we do and we add value. We have our own loyal followings. We bring a halo effect that you really can't get without us. We have access to media that you would have to pay for. We have access to celebrities that you would have to pay a lot of money for, and frankly, you don't want to handle them. Make us do it. We have value, so it's worth partnering with us. But to that point, like, it's worth partnering with an organization who actually loves what you do and make, not just your money, as much as you love what we do and make, not just that we have Justin Bieber.
Yeah, just to say, and Kraft is a great partner with us in the work that we're doing around cocoa farmers in West Africa, particularly with their Cadbury acquisition. And so, it's a great example of a partnership where we're doing great work on the ground, helping poor farmers who wouldn't have had access to global markets, getting access to global markets, but it's also helping Kraft in opening up new markets and having cheaper sources and better and higher quality sources of cocoa in their production. So it's a real win-win situation. Again, I mean, we vet the corporations that we work with, and if we're not willing to stand behind those brands, we also wouldn't be willing to take the resources. So we feel we should stand behind the brands as well. Now, that said, if our name is going to be out there in some public way, that's something we need to work on and make sure that we're comfortable with the way in which it's used. We're very careful about our brand. It's a brand that has stood for over the course of time, and so we are protective of that. But we do that again in a way that enhances both of our brands.
Fantastic. Well, Dr. Gayle and Nancy Lublin, I can't thank you enough. I hope they've provided some insights and some wisdom to help you change the way you think. Thank you so much.